say welcome to the Sunny and G podcast. February 1st, new month, but the Canucks are still first in the league. Still first in the league every month.
I keep thinking that drop-off was going to happen. We thought it was going to be in December, which is like known to be a bad month for Canucks. In January, somehow we pulled through. And in February, here it is, and we get a beautiful All-Star break. And in that break, everybody gets to kind of take it in, man. All these teams around the U.S. are going to have to take it in right now. Anybody that's watching the All-Star thing are thinking in the back of their head that who's the number one team all the way from Vancouver.
I mean, that's crazy, dude. 71 points, first in the league. We're tied with Boston right now, which is, Boston's never a good team to see up there personally. But, the fact we're this deep into the season, we're still first in the league. It's impressive. Obviously, the Canucks management team is, definitely happy with what's going on, considering we just pulled off a huge trade for Lindholm.
Yeah, huge trade. We got the GM re-signed.
Yeah, we got the other guy. Rutherford got his extension. Yeah. The GM got his. Obviously, Talkett just got signed last year, so he's probably not due for any time soon, right? But, he's an all-star. He's an all-star coach, at least at the end of the day, so he's got something on there. Alvin might even win GM of the year or whatever awards they give out for that.
Canucks.
Right, all the guys they brought in the offseason been huge, like Bluger, all these guys. Now they got to re-sign him, of course, too. But that's something we can talk about later in the season here when it gets closer too. But what do you think of the trade for the Canucks? Elias Lindholm, do you think it was an overpay or what?
I think for a player like that, that's honestly what you'd have to give up. You'd have to give up somebody good, some up and coming, and then obviously there's going to be a draft pick out of that guy.
Yeah,
especially a team like Calgary, who's in that phase of shipping out players and looking at a rebuild. They needed the picks coming back to them.
So for me, I know this might sound like a cop-out answer, but I think it's going to depend on what we do in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right? If we lose out in the first round, huge overpay. Yeah. If we lose in the second round, for example, and we win the first playoff round, then you kind of be like, you know what? We end up winning the first playoff round. We haven't done this in Vancouver in a live crowd in like 10 years, at least. And then if we make it past the second round and go to the third round, I think at that point you'd say it'd be worth it too. If we get to the finals or win the finals or something like that, obviously it might have been underpay at that point, right?
That's probably the biggest thing is like we could go to the playoffs and we could do well in the playoffs.
Yeah,
he could do bad.
Yeah,
which is like I'm hoping he has a great season. Obviously, it really helps us stay number one or at least top three. Mm-hmm. But I kind of hope in the playoffs, like he isn't as good, and we have a couple of the other guys shine. Because if we do want this guy back again, we got to think about he's going to be a free agent too, right?
Yeah, and he's going to be 30 in December. So we've already signed a bunch of guys like Miller and older contracts too, right?
The next issue is guy hits into his 30s.
Yeah,
we do that overpaying. So right now it's like I hope he has a really good season. Playoffs are decent, but not too well for him. I'm still obviously rooting for Canucks to win the Stanley Cup. But, like, if we're winning the Stanley Cup, I'd rather have him do well. But if we're at a point where, like, he doesn't do as well, we come out the second, third round. Then I wouldn't mind, picking this guy up again if he does have a really good season and finish. Because he got, like, almost, like, 40 points himself.
No, he's got 32 points in 47 games. So he's averaging, if you average it out to 81 games, 55 points in a season. 55. So it's just kind of low for a center, right? But I mean, the other thing is he's going from a team from Calgary where I think he was the first-line center to a team with the Canucks where he doesn't have to be the first-line center, right? He's going to play a guy like Pettersson, most likely, and Mikheyev. Yeah. And then you got Besser, Miller, and maybe Hoglander, depending on who they want on that first line. Pia Sutter is probably going to be another guy in there too. The third line is going to be untouched, right, with those three. And then the fourth line, you can kind of be able to get away with that a little bit because the first three lines are good.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they gave up a lot, I think, for sure. Like, the Hunter guy's an up-and-coming good defenseman, but he's more offensively inclined and a little undersized. So maybe the Johnny Jurmo guy is just a literal shot in the dark. I think you just, like, threw him in for the hell of it. Right? The first rounder is late in the first round, so it's not as big a loss if you're, giving up a potential pick between, like, 10, like, if you're barely trying to make the playoffs. Yeah. That pick's around 16, right? Yeah. And then Kuzmenko, I feel the shitty thing about Kuzmenko is he killed it for us last year. But he hasn't done the same under, Talkett style of play compared to what he was doing with Bruce Boudreau, where you can go up and down the ice. Defense wasn't as much of a priority for him. Yeah. And I think that's the big difference with Lindholm, is that he's going to be able to bring you. He's not like the greatest defensive player in the world, but he's a good defensive player. He's going to be able to play center, which is a huge need. And let's say something were to happen to one of our bottom 6 centers, you could potentially move him to a third center role, right? And then you still got a fourth line center, because come playoff times, there's always injuries. Guys get hurt, offense, defense, right? So I think as far as a fit goes and the type of player we needed, he was the perfect type of player. Do I think they overpaid? I think they did. But if they can somehow win a Stanley Cup, let's say, that's a pipe dream in Canuck land here. But let's say by some miracle we end up winning the cup, right? Then you're like, hell no, it's an overpay. But you lose in the first round? Yeah. That's a lot to give up for a rental, right? Yeah, so but I think overall, because the fits works, it's not like some random winger or someone that doesn't quite fit the team, right? So I'm excited. They said they might, be looking for other defensemen and other wingers too, or lower centers, right? So
another defenseman to add in there.
I think they honestly, but the problem is every team is looking for a right-handed defenseman who can play in your top 4. Obviously, the top, the number 1, 2 defenseman types, no team's really going to be willing to give up unless the guy's like a free agent who may not re-sign with the team kind of vibe, right? But even finding guys who are number 2 pairing defensemen, your third and fourth defenseman, people don't want to give those guys up either, man. They're good defense, especially if you have good contracts on these guys too. True. So if the Canucks can somehow find a second pairing, because you're a right-handed defenseman, because your first line you have Hronek and Hughes. Yeah. Your second line's probably going to be, Ian Cole or maybe Soucy if he can stay healthy and come back kind of thing. Soucy or what. And then whoever's your third line pairing is probably going to be Soucy or Cole with possibly Myers. And then Zadorov's your 7th defenseman now, right? And then you still have the Yulson guys, your number 8. Now you've got some real solid depth. Otherwise, I feel like those kind of guys are one step up too much from where they should be playing. But if you thought this was an overpay, trying to find a top 4 right-handed defenseman is going to be just as much of an overpay, if not more, man.
Yeah, so I think that's why it's a good move for them to go for a guy like this.
Yeah.
Because now the defensive side, you can kind of look at it and be like, do we really need to make that push right now? Because defensively, our point differential is fucking ridiculous.
It is.
So at least defensively, we haven't been letting teams just go apeshit on us.
Yeah.
But offensively, we've been kind of scoring at a pace that's unheard of in Vancouver.
Well, that's dude, we're first in the league in goal scoring right now, right? So everybody's kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And you know what? You're going to have to find ways to win playoff games multiple different ways, right? Guys get hurt. You're playing different style of matchup too, right? Which matters. Some teams are more physical. Some teams have more speed. Yeah. Depending on, some guys do well, some guys don't. So it's a long, it's 2 months. We saw it when the Canucks last made the run, all the injuries that we had along the way too. And we made it to the finals. The other teams who had injuries, and unfortunately it worked against them earlier rounds too, right? But yeah, I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation is something I'm really happy about, that we're, talking about potential deadline additions. Canucks are in playoff conversation. So
last year our conversations on NHL was scarce.
I don't think we really talk other than hey, it's the Canucks are still alive, and there's a trade deadline coming up. Maybe they'll do something. But then, they had the talk at higher later, and then finally things started to pick up after that. So, looks like, the end of last year wasn't quite as big of a fluke as what we thought it was going to be. But I think that's pretty much done for the Canucks portion of the Sonny and G podcast. We'll be back.